When we talk about Jesus and his life, it's important to understand not just what he did on earth, but who he was before everything began. Jesus spoke about his existence before the world was created, offering us a glimpse into his eternal nature and his relationship with God the Father. This understanding helps us see Jesus not just as a historical figure, but as the eternal Son of God, who was present with God from the very beginning. Let's examine what Jesus revealed about his existence before the creation of the world, and how this helps us understand his divine nature and his role in everything that exists. Jesus made several statements that hints at his existence before the creation of the world, which reveals his divine nature and eternal presence. One of the key passages is found in the Gospel of John, where Jesus explicitly speaks about his pre-existence. John 17 verse 5. In his high priestly prayer, Jesus says, "And now, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory I had with you before the world began." Here, Jesus is praying to the Father, asking to be restored to the glory he shared with God before the world was created. This verse clearly indicates that Jesus existed in a glorified state with the Father before anything was made, affirming his eternal nature. In John 17, Jesus prays not just for himself, but also for his followers and all who would come to believe in him. This prayer happens right before his arrest, making it a meaningful moment where Jesus considers his mission, his relationship with the Father, and the honor he will receive after fulfilling his purpose on earth. In the Bible, glory often represents God's presence and power. In the Old Testament, God's glory was shown through events like the cloud that guided the Israelites or the fire on Mount Sinai. Here, Jesus is asking to return to the glorious state he shared with the Father before he came to earth. Before Jesus was born as a man, he existed in a divine and glorious state with God. This glory was part of who he was as God. When Jesus became human, he didn't stop being God, but he did hide his divine glory so he could fully experience life as a human, including suffering. In this prayer, Jesus is asking to be restored to his full glory, the divine nature he had before the world was created. This request is linked to his resurrection and ascension, where he is honored and returned to his rightful place with the Father. John 8 verse 58. Another profound statement comes from Jesus during a conversation with the Jews. "Very truly I tell you," Jesus answered, "before Abraham was born, I am." By saying "I am," Jesus not only claims pre-existence before Abraham, but he also identifies himself with the divine name revealed to Moses in Exodus 3 verse 14, where God says, "I am who I am." This declaration links Jesus directly to the eternal God of Israel, who existed before time began. The phrase "I am" is significant because it connects to how God identified himself to Moses in the Old Testament. In Exodus 3 verse 14, God says, "I am who I am," a name that means God is eternal and unchanging. By using "I am," Jesus is linking himself to this divine name, showing that he shares in God's eternal nature. When Jesus says he existed before Abraham, he's making a statement about his timeless nature. Abraham is a key figure in Jewish history, but Jesus is saying he existed long before Abraham, indicating he is beyond the normal limits of time. Jesus exists outside of time, connecting him to the eternal God of Israel. This also helps us understand what the Trinity means. Jesus, as the Son, is fully divine and exists with the Father and the Holy Spirit from eternity. This helps us to see Jesus as not just a teacher, but as the eternal God who came to earth. The Jewish leaders were upset by this claim because they saw it as blasphemy, leading them to want to stone Jesus. John 1 verses 1 to 3. The opening verses of the Gospel of John also speaks to Jesus' pre-existence and his role in creation. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made." In this passage, the Word refers to Jesus, who was with God from the very beginning. It emphasizes that Jesus is not a created being but the Creator himself, through whom all things came into existence. Here's a simpler way to understand these verses. In the beginning was the Word, start of everything. This means that Jesus, called the Word here, was already there right from the very start of time. Before anything was created, Jesus was already existing, always there. It tells us that Jesus is eternal, which means he didn't just start when the world started. He has always been there. And the Word was with God. This tells us that Jesus was not just there at the beginning, but was also close to God. They were together from the start, showing a special bond between them. And the Word was God, meaning Jesus is not just with God, but is also fully God himself. It means Jesus shares the same nature as God and is equal to him. He was with God in the beginning. Now this part emphasizes that Jesus wasn't just there initially, but was always with God, maintaining a constant and close relationship. Through him all things were made. This shows that everything in the world was made through Jesus. He was the one who made everything come into existence, not just a part of it, but all of it. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. This reinforces that nothing in the world was made without Jesus. He is the source of all creation, and everything exists because of him. Jesus has always existed, long before the world began. He's not just a historical figure, but the eternal Son of God. Jesus was actively involved in creating everything we see. He is the one through whom all things were made. Knowing that Jesus is both with God and is God himself helps us understand his unique and central role in everything. It reminds us that he is much more than a teacher. He is the creator and has always been a part of everything. Colossians 1 verses 16 to 17. The Apostle Paul also affirms Jesus' pre-existence and role in creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Paul explains that Jesus is the agent of creation, and everything exists through and for him. His existence before all things underscores his eternal nature. Colossians 1 verses 16 to 17 gives us an important view of Jesus Christ's role in creating and sustaining everything. Here's a simpler breakdown of what these verses mean. For in him all things were created. This means that everything in the universe was made by Jesus. From the stars and planets to all the things we see and don't see, Jesus was the one who made them. Things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. This includes everything in the physical world, like mountains and animals, and the spiritual world, like angels or powers we can't see. Whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. This refers to all kinds of authorities, whether they're earthly leaders or spiritual forces. It shows that Jesus created and oversees all kinds of powers. All things have been created through him and for him. Everything was made through Jesus, meaning he was the one who brought it into existence. Everything also has a purpose related to Jesus. The universe and everything in it are meant to fulfill his plan. He is before all things. This tells us that Jesus existed before everything else was created. He's timeless and has always been around, even before the world began. In him all things hold together. Jesus not only made everything, but also keeps it all working and in order. He holds the universe together and makes sure everything functions as it should. Jesus is central to everything. He made everything and keeps it all running smoothly. Jesus has always existed, even before anything was created. Everything exists for Jesus' purposes, showing how important he is to the whole universe. Knowing that Jesus created and sustains everything helps us understand his authority and importance in our lives. It reminds us that everything we see and experience is part of a bigger plan centered around Jesus. As we wrap up our lesson, Jesus' declaration in the book of Revelation ties together his eternal existence. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Revelation 22 verse 13. Here, Jesus identifies himself as the beginning and the end of all things, further emphasizing his divine nature and eternal existence. These passages collectively affirm that Jesus is eternal, existing with God before the creation of the world. His identity as the pre-existent Word, Creator, and Divine, I Am, reveals his unique role in the Godhead and his uncreated, eternal nature. Revelation 22 verse 13 is a powerful statement where Jesus describes himself in terms that highlight his eternal nature and supreme authority. Here's a more detailed and approachable explanation of this verse. Alpha and Omega are the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet. By using these letters, Jesus is saying he encompasses the entire scope of time and existence, from the beginning to the end. This means Jesus is present at every point in time. He is the starting point and the final point of everything that exists. The first and the last reinforces that Jesus is both the beginning of all things and the end. He was there at the start of time and will be there at the end of time. It shows that Jesus has authority over all of time and history. He oversees everything from beginning to end. Similar to Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end indicates that Jesus is the origin of all creation and the final destination. He is involved in every stage of existence, from creation to fulfillment. It emphasizes that Jesus is not bound by time like we are. He transcends it. Jesus' statements here affirm that he has always existed and will always exist. He is not limited by time or space. Jesus is asserting his divine authority and supreme role in the universe. These titles show that Jesus is fully involved in every aspect of creation and its ultimate purpose. Jesus is showing that he has authority over all things, from creation to fulfillment. Knowing that Jesus is both the beginning and the end encourages us to see our lives as part of his larger plan and to trust in his ultimate purpose for all things. In looking at John 17 verse 5, John 8 verse 58, John 1 verses 1 to 3, Colossians 1 verses 16 to 17, and Revelation 22 verse 13, we see a clear picture of Jesus' eternal nature and his role in creation. Jesus is shown as existing before the world began, being the creator of all things and the one who sustains everything. He is both the Alpha and Omega, meaning he is present from the beginning to the end. Understanding these aspects helps us appreciate Jesus not just as a historical figure, but as the eternal Son of God who is central to all creation. This perspective invites us to see our lives within his greater, timeless plan and encourages us to align with his purpose. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, don't forget to subscribe. May God bless you as you continue your journey of faith.